You probably don't think about ice very much. You press a glass against the dispenser on your freezer door, a few cubes tumble out, and that's it. Or maybe you stop at a gas station before a barbecue and grab a bag for $2. Ice is an afterthought. It's just there, all the time, without effort, without cost worth mentioning. But think about the last time your power went out for a full day. Remember that low-grade panic? The fridge getting warm, the milk going bad, the scramble to find bags of ice before everything spoils. That uneasy feeling, that sense that cold is slipping away and you can't stop it, used to be the normal, permanent condition of keeping food fresh in America. For most of this country's history, ice wasn't something your kitchen made. It was something a man carried to your door on his back, up your stairs, 3 times a week. And the system that made that possible was far bigger, far stranger, and far more deeply woven into daily life than most people realize. Picture a summer morning, let's say around 1935, on a residential street in a mid-sized American city. It's early, maybe 7 o'clock, but the air is already warm. Elm trees line the block, wooden porches, screen doors, laundry lines in the back, and coming down the street, slow and heavy, is an ice wagon. In earlier decades, it would have been horse-drawn, but by the 30s, in many cities, it was a flatbed truck with an open bed, stacked with massive blocks of ice, often 300 pounds each, scored with grooves so they could be split into smaller pieces. The blocks are covered with canvas tarps and packed in sawdust to slow the melting. The iceman rides with the load. He's wearing a leather shoulder pad, some wore a rubber cape, because he's going to hoist wet, freezing blocks onto his back and shoulders dozens of times before lunch. His arms are thick, his grip enormous. This is not a gentle job. He pulls up to the first house and looks at the front window. There's a card there, a square piece of cardboard with a number printed on each edge. 25, 50, 75, 100. The household has rotated the card so the number they want faces up. 50 pounds today. He doesn't need to knock. He doesn't need to ask. He reads the card from the street, pulls out his ice pick, and scores the big block along the groove. One firm crack, and a clean 50-pound piece separates. He grabs it with iron tongs, heavy, curved, the kind of tool that becomes an extension of your hands after years of use, swings the block onto his shoulder pad, walks up the porch steps, opens the screen door, and steps inside. He knows this house. He knows where the icebox is. He slides the block into the top compartment, checks the drip pan underneath. It's getting full, so he empties it into the sink, and he's back out the door in under 2 minutes. The screen door slaps shut behind him. Outside, 3 kids from the block are already waiting by the tailgate. He flicks a few slivers of ice their way. They grab them off the wet wood and run, sucking on chips of ice in the July heat. This was a ritual, one that thousands of people later recalled as one of the small, bright details of childhood. But the ice itself was only the beginning of the story. Behind that one delivery was an entire ecosystem, and it ran like clockwork. The ice had to come from somewhere. In the early days, it came from nature. Every winter, crews in northern states would head out onto frozen lakes and rivers, places like the Hudson Valley, the Kennebec River in Maine, and the Great Lakes region. They cut blocks of ice using horse-drawn saws. The blocks were hauled to massive ice houses, some of them enormous wooden structures, and packed tight with sawdust for insulation. Done right, that ice could last through the summer and well into fall. It was a seasonal industry, and it employed thousands of workers, cutters, haulers, packers, teamsters. By the early 1900s, though, manufactured ice began to take over. Ice plants using ammonia compression systems could produce ice year-round, regardless of weather or geography. And they were local. In many cities of any real size, there was at least one ice plant, often more. From the plant, the ice moved through a distribution chain, from plant to wholesale depot, depot to delivery wagon or truck, and finally truck to your kitchen. In the summer months, delivery typically happened 3 times a week. In winter, less often. And on the receiving end sat the icebox, not a refrigerator. An icebox was a piece of furniture, often quite handsome, a wooden cabinet with a zinc or porcelain lining, a compartment on top for the ice block, lower shelves for food, and a drip pan underneath that caught the meltwater as the ice slowly disappeared. Emptying that drip pan was a daily chore in millions of American homes. Forget it, and you would wake up to a puddle on the kitchen floor. And that system worked for decades, until it did not. But here is what made it more than just a delivery service. The iceman was a trusted figure. He walked into people's homes, often when nobody was there. The door was left unlocked for him on purpose. He was part of the neighborhood's rhythm, like the milkman, like the postman. He knew families by name, knew who was home and who was not, knew that Mrs. Callahan wanted 50 pounds on Monday, but only 25 on Thursday. No clipboard, no app, no scheduling software. Just memory, built over years of the same route, the same faces, the same screen doors. And it went deeper than delivery. People had a hands-on relationship with keeping food cold that is almost hard to imagine now. You knew how long a block of ice would last in your box. You planned your meals around delivery days. You kept the icebox door shut as much as possible because every time you opened it, you were spending cold, and cold was a thing you could watch disappear. You bought perishables in smaller amounts. You thought about food preservation every single day, not as an idea, but as a physical task. But the real shift was not about temperature. It was about time. And then a few things happened that flipped everything. The first was a machine. Electric refrigerators had actually been around since the 1910s and the 1920s, but early models were expensive, unreliable, and in some cases, genuinely dangerous. The refrigerants used in those first units, sulfur dioxide and methyl formate, were toxic. A leak could make you seriously ill, and in rare cases, it could be fatal. People knew this. Many did not trust the technology, and honestly, they had reason not to. But by the mid-1930s, a new refrigerant called Freon changed the equation. It was far safer, more stable, and it worked well. Manufacturers like GE, Frigidaire, and Kelvinator jumped in with aggressive pricing and national advertising. The electric refrigerator did not have to be perfect. It just had to be easier than what it replaced, and it was, dramatically so. No more delivery schedules, no more drip pans, no more melting. The cold did not deplete. You plugged it in, and it just ran. But here is the part that catches people off guard. Technology alone didn't kill the Iceman. It was the economics that sealed it. An electric refrigerator was a big upfront purchase, but ice delivery was a recurring cost. Week after week, month after month, year after year, you were paying for ice. When refrigerators were expensive, the math still favored the Iceman for most families. But after World War II, everything shifted. Mass production drove prices down. The post-war housing boom filled the suburbs with brand-new homes, and those homes were designed with kitchen spaces built for a refrigerator, not an icebox. The icebox didn't just become outdated. It literally didn't fit the new American house. And consumer credit made the upfront cost manageable. You could buy a fridge on an installment plan, pay it off over a year or two, and still come out ahead compared to what you'd spend on ice delivery over the same period. Once that math changed, everything else followed. The iceman did not lose his job in a day. He lost it one house at a time. First, the wealthier households on his route switched. They could afford the new refrigerators earliest, so the iceman lost his best-paying customers first. His route got thinner. Fewer stops per mile meant higher costs per delivery, which meant prices crept up for the remaining customers, which pushed more of them toward buying a fridge. It was a slow spiral, and it only turned one direction. Ice plants started closing. Some consolidated, but many just shut their doors. Fewer plants meant longer hauls for the remaining drivers, which raised costs again. Young men stopped entering the trade. Why spend years building up a route in an industry that was visibly shrinking? By the late 1940s, in most American cities, the tipping point had already passed. By the mid-1950s, the iceman was a rarity, a holdout serving a handful of older customers who had not switched. By 1960, in most of the country, he was gone, and most people did not even notice it happening. But the route did not just get shorter. The whole world behind it started to shrink. When the iceman disappeared, he did not go alone. The ice plants closed, and with them went the plant workers, the men who ran the compressors, loaded the trucks, and managed the storage. The tong manufacturers lost their market. The sawdust suppliers, who had fed the insulation trade for generations, found their customers vanishing. Up north, the seasonal ice harvesting crews, the men who had cut blocks from frozen lakes every winter, had already been declining for years, but the end of home delivery finished them off entirely. An entire supply chain, built up over more than a century, dissolved in roughly 2 decades. And that disappearance changed more than anyone expected. It was not just a job that vanished, it was a kind of relationship. The iceman, like the milkman, was one of the last regular, trusted visitors who entered your home as a matter of routine. That domestic access by a familiar outsider, someone who was not family but who was known, expected, and part of the weekly rhythm, largely disappeared from American life. We do not really have an equivalent anymore. Something subtler changed as well. People stopped thinking about cold as a resource. When you had an icebox, you understood, physically and practically, that keeping food fresh required effort, attention, and a supply that ran out. You managed it. You were connected to the mechanics of your own daily survival in a small but real way. The refrigerator made all of that invisible. Cold just was. You did not manage it. You did not think about it. You did not watch it deplete. And, paradoxically, as food preservation became effortless, food waste quietly increased, because when keeping food cold costs you nothing in daily attention, it is easier to forget what is in the back of the shelf. The icebox itself tells this story in miniature. It was a piece of furniture people maintained. They relined it when the zinc wore through. They repaired the hinges, replaced the drip pan, and kept it clean. A refrigerator, once it broke beyond a basic fix, was replaced. The shift from tending an object to discarding an object, from fix it to buy a new one, was already happening here in American kitchens, years before it became the defining pattern of how we treat almost everything we own. The strange part is, nobody really decided to end it. It just ended. It's hard to argue the refrigerator wasn't better. It was cleaner, more reliable, and less work by a wide margin. The iceman didn't vanish because of some mistake or some injustice. He vanished because the problem he solved got solved a different way, a way that was cheaper, easier, and did not require a man to carry 70 pounds of ice up your stairs 3 mornings a week. That was probably inevitable. But something quieter disappeared with him. The rhythm of the delivery, the card in the window, the kids chasing the wagon down the block on a hot July afternoon, the man who walked into your kitchen and knew your family by name. None of that had a replacement. We stopped thinking about cold, and honestly, we stopped thinking about a lot of the invisible systems that keep daily life running smoothly. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's what progress actually looks like. Things working so well that you forget they're working at all, and that quiet hum replaced something no one thought to save. Listen tonight. When the house is still and everyone's asleep, you might hear it, the low, steady hum of the refrigerator against the kitchen wall. It's the sound that replaced the iceman, and nobody notices it anymore. So, did your family ever have an icebox? Did anyone in your town still remember the iceman making his rounds? I'd genuinely love to hear about it. Drop it in the comments.